This video is brought to you by Roll for Combat and the RPG Superstar Contest. Create up to 3 of your own Pathfinder 2nd Edition monsters for a chance at winning several prizes, including the publication of your creations in an upcoming Battle Zoo bestiary. Enter now at rpgsuperstar.com. Hello and welcome to Rest and Daily Preparations in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Once every 24 hours, characters can rest for 8 hours to heal, refresh abilities and resources, and avoid fatigue. By law, all 8 hours need to be spent sleeping. However, it is not uncommon for GMs to allow 2 of these hours to be spent on other activities, such as eating or conversing rather than sleeping, as long as the entire time is spent in a state of peaceful calm. These 8 hours do not need to be consecutive and may be interrupted, and after that interruption, rest may resume until a total of 8 hours of sleep is achieved. When a character gets 8 hours of rest, they regain a number of hit points equal to their level times their constitution modifier, which is always treated as being a minimum of 1 for this purpose. So, for example, when a 5th level character who has a 14 constitution rests for 8 hours, they heal 10 hit points. A 14 constitution equals a +2 constitution modifier, so 5 for the level times 2 equals 10. If this 5th level character had a constitution score of 11, which equals a con modifier of 0, they would still heal 5 hit points when resting. 5 for their level times 1 for their constitution modifier, because the formula for resting is level times con modifier with a minimum con modifier of 1. And this assumes that the character is resting with a reasonable degree of comfort. In other situations, such as resting outdoors with no shelter, characters regain only half the usual number of hit points. Note again that resting may only be performed once every 24 hours, so staying in bed for 16 hours would not double this amount. Instead, you would need to take a long-term rest. When a character spends an entire day resting, usually in bed, they regain double the number of hit points healed with normal rest. So, using our previous example of a 5th level character with a 14 constitution, they would heal 10 hit points with 8 hours of rest, receive no additional benefit for 16 hours of rest, but would heal a total of 20 hit points if they spent the entire day resting, as that counts as a long-term rest. During adventures, players are likely to need to make camp in areas that are not completely safe. When they do so, they'll want to set a rotating watch so at least one character is safeguarding the team while the rest sleep. This time spent on watch does not count towards the 8 hours needed, and therefore having a watch will extend the total time needed beyond 8 hours. The core rulebook provides a simple table to determine how much time each person is spending on watch and the total amount of time needed to ensure all characters have 8 hours of sleep depending on the party size. While sleeping, characters have the prone, flat-footed, and unconscious conditions, which impose a -4 penalty to their perception scores. If a surprise encounter does occur during rest, the GM can either roll randomly to determine whose watch it is before the encounter begins, or if the enemy is very clever, they might wait until a specific player is on watch before they launch their attack. When a sneak attack is sprung during a rest, all participants in the encounter roll their initiatives as normal. The attacking creatures will roll stealth for their initiatives. Any players awake and on watch will roll perception for their initiatives, and any sleeping characters will roll perception -4 for their initiatives. Sleeping characters do not automatically awaken when this initiative is rolled, but they may attempt perception checks -4 at the start of each of their turns to see if they are awakened by the sound of combat. The DC for any check to see if a character wakes up will be up to the GM to determine, but the book does offer that the sound of nearby combat is only DC 5 to detect. In addition to rolling for initiative when the sneak attack is sprung, the GM might also require the ambushers to roll stealth checks against the player's perception DCs as they approach the camp. One of the main consequences of not getting proper rest is the fatigued condition. When you're fatigued, you suffer a -1 status penalty to armor class and all saves. You also cannot use any exploration activities while traveling. You'd be too tired to hustle and wouldn't be able to hold your focus long enough to properly use Follow the Expert. nor would you be able to keep your eyes open long enough to use the learn a spell activity while riding in the back of a wagon. There are two main ways to gain the fatigued condition. First is if you go more than 16 hours without at least 6 hours of rest. And the second usual way of being inflicted by fatigue is by sleeping in armor. You can rest while wearing your armor and gain all the benefits of resting, but unless that armor has the comfort trait like padded armor or explorer's clothing does, then you would gain the fatigued condition when you wake up. And the fatigued condition is removed after you get 8 hours of rest, unless of course you rest in armor that does not have the comfort trait, in which case you just continue to have fatigue. And on the topic of sleeping in armor, it's worth noting that it takes 1 minute to put on light armor and 5 minutes to put on medium or heavy armor, and it only takes 1 minute to remove any kind of armor. After daily rest is complete, characters spend roughly 1 hour on their daily preparations. Characters of all classes participate in this and use this time in different ways. Clerics usually use this time in prayer, bards practice playing their instruments, wizards study their spellbooks, fighters sharpen their blades, and so on. Mechanically speaking, this is typically when player abilities refresh and other daily resources are spent. For example, if your game is tracking rations, then this is when each person in the party would consume 1 day's worth of rations. For simplicity, you can track food and water once per day during daily preparations, and you're not required to track it throughout the day, although the GM may choose to adjust this when adventuring in a harsh environment like a desert. After daily preparations, spellcasters regain their spent spell slots and focus points. Any items or abilities that have restrictions, such as once per day, are also refreshed after daily preparation so they may be used again, and during this time you may invest up to 10 magic items, and you also equip your weapons and armor. At the end of daily preparations, you are considered ready to adventure, and keep in mind that this time of daily preparations may only occur after a full period of rest. If you're unable to rest, then you do not get to perform your daily preparations. And since you can only benefit from rest once every 24 hours, you can only perform daily preparations once per day. So, no resting for 8 hours, adventuring for 1 or 2 more, and then resting for another 8 hours to get all of your spell slots back in the same day. Before we close, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of my patrons. These videos would not be possible without their continued generosity and support. Members of the How It's Played Patreon community receive special benefits like exclusive content and getting to vote on the topics I cover. If you would like to support this channel and help it grow, the easiest way to do that is by subscribing and clicking the bell icon so you get notified when new videos release. And I can always be reached through Twitter and Facebook too. Thanks for watching, take care, and happy gaming!